I'm Mike Hall, the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation, and through our missions and programs, we support the Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life program by providing experience, guidance, and vetted resources for current and veteran Rangers and their families. We support the Ranger for Life program by providing benchmark transition assistance. We understand that transition is a lifelong event that starts in enlistment. We maintain transition counselors at each of the Ranger battalions, offering timely and personalized support in the regiment's transition Big Five of mentorship and networking, education, financial wellness, VA benefits, and holistic health and wellness to active duty as well as Ranger veterans. Central to our approach is our extensive mentorship program, leveraging a network of about 10,000 formal and informal former members of the 75th Ranger Regiment who provide unvarnished experience and access to their networks. They know what success looks like. These meaningful relationships allow both mentors and mentees to stay connected to the Ranger community and benefit from shared experience and guidance. Today, we're going to hear mentor advice from Ranger Network mentor John Detro on his experience as a VA compensation and pension exam process. Doc, JD, it's always good to catch up with you.
Great to see you, Sergeant Major, always.
Yeah, we got started a little bit late here because we were catching up on some other things, but I mean, you're one of those guys that really needs no introduction, but for some of the younger guys out there, why don't you give us a little bit of your background on your military and what you've done after you retired from the military.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Well, I spent 36 years in the Army, retired in December 2023, and I was fortunate to be the first PA to be a command surgeon for a four-star headquarters here at US SOCOM. So very grateful that I could end my career in special operations. Started out as a medic, became a lab guy, and then I went to PA school, and I was on the Army running team, and I was at Fort Benning, and I ran into guys like Colonel McChrystal and other runners, and there was an opportunity. One of the PAs was leaving Third Ranger Battalion, and Chris Pappas, who was the surgeon at the time, said, "Hey, you interested in assessing?" And so I showed up as a butter bar lieutenant with 5 jumps and no tab, and was fortunate enough to arrive at a time when tactical combat casualty care was just taken off between Sergeant Major and Colonel McChrystal, and then the Regimental Surgeon's Office and Third Ranger Battalion. We really started ramping up what we were doing for medicine after some lessons learned in Somalia. So I was very lucky to be here for that. I went and did some orthopedic training, fellowship, deployed, and then I came back to Third Ranger Battalion again, went up to regiment, and then I went over to JSOC to serve with our counterparts up there for a couple of years. And so did a little bit of everything. Been very fortunate to have spent, I think my most memorable time in the military was my time spent in the Ranger Regiment by far.
Yeah. And what have you done after you retired from the military?
Yeah. So my wife is ill. And so when I retired, there were a lot of opportunities, a lot that would take a lot of travel. And so I decided that with her illness, I really couldn't dedicate full time to anybody, and felt that if I did, that if something were to happen, I'd leave them hanging. So I decided to do some part time work. So I was fortunate enough to be asked to come and be a adjunct faculty at the University of Tampa. And then at the same time, I started doing the VA compensation and pension exams, and so I've been doing those both at the same time, mainly doing the exams, teaching 1 day a week, and now I'm kind of flipping. September 1st, I started out here as full-time faculty, and then I'll continue doing the exams 1 or 2 days a week. And so it's a good combination of things to do, and gives I get a little chance to give back to the veterans when they come in. I'll talk a little bit about it. Where they're really to make to do an exam and then make a medical opinion. And many times I find that they didn't always get the greatest advice, and things might not be going their way during the exam. So I educate them on things they can do to strengthen their packets, etc. And the good thing is, being paratroopers and rangers, there's a lot more leeway because of the understanding for the rigors of the positions, and the examiners, take that into account, especially if you have somebody that's making claims that may not have a bunch of things in their medical record to support them. And so I just want to say, just based on coming from regiment, you've got a little leg up on those claims because they do understand, a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, we did another webinar about the PA program there, but a great PA program down there at the University of Tampa. So anybody that's getting out and thinking
We're
about
looking
doing
for you.
that, yeah, call Doc Detro and he'll get you squared away. But it's a great program with really I got to meet some of them, some really great people. So yeah, let's get into this. It's the great mystery. But what
Mhm.
the
It is.
secrets. The VA is out to screw me. They're trying to keep my money. And of course none of that is really true. But what should a ranger expect during a VA compensation and pension exam, a CNP exam?
Okay. Before I start that, though, I do want to make a comment on something you said, Sergeant Major. Right now, this last year was the highest approval for disability claims. There's been a lot of training done. There are three companies that do the exams, and I do them for two, and then also the VA could do the exams. And the examiners are really trained to, if there's any doubt, to side with the veteran. And when we do these exams, it's really more like a civil law case, right? It's a preponderance of evidence that supports the veteran, so 51%. And so it's not like, a criminal case where you have to have all your ducks in a row and 100% evidence to support your claim. And so the veteran and the examiners and then the reviewers who we send our packets to, they're also, many of them are vets, and so they will definitely question one of us if they think that we may have missed something that would be detrimental to the veteran. And so there's multiple checkpoints all the way to the VA to ensure that. So really what happens is when you go to do, first I'd say a couple things. Number one, you are responsible for your claim. You can have a VSO and other folks help you, a lawyer, but if you don't invest in yourself and ensure that you review all your information being put into the file to be reviewed, then it's kind of on you if things don't turn out right. It's not the VSO's packet, it's not your lawyer's packet, it's your packet. So the number one foot stomper is make sure that you're invested in it. Secondly, uh, if you can do it and you're still in, do your disability claim before you get out. Benefits, it's BDD, but basically your benefits are awarded upon discharge. So that really, as soon as you exit, like I retired on 1 December, on 12 December, my disability was approved. And so that's important, not just because of pay, but more importantly, if you do your claim while you're still in, you don't really have to prove chronicity of your condition. You just have to prove you had the condition, right? So you might have broke your ankle in 1995 and here it's 2015, you're going to retire. The examiners are likely going to side that if you continue to complain about ankle pain, even though you may not have been seen in 10 years, you're likely going to get a recommended approval for that claim. If you get out in 15 years after you get out and you're claiming you got back pain and now you're 55 years old and you worked as a policeman for 20 years, then it makes it a little more difficult for the examiner to say, yeah, your condition was caused by the military versus something you did after the military. So that's just something to think about. The other one I'd say is, and Rangers are probably worse than most at this, is we just suck stuff up. Things are broken, dangling. We get some 50-mile-an-hour tape the arm back on, keep going, and don't complain and don't get seen. And when folks come in for the exam, they don't always really express the level of their condition. And many times, if they bring the spouse, that helps because the spouse will definitely say, yep, yeah, he's saying his shoulder pain hurts a little, but he doesn't sleep at night. He's grumpy. He can't do things in the house that I need him to do. And so, if you do have a spouse, 95% of the time they're very beneficial to bring along with you because they will be able to share some things that the examiner will take into account. So those are some things to think about. Another thing I'd think about is, so if you don't have something in your record, you can do a couple things. So if you get injured, a lot of guys get injured on parachute jumps, but you're in the middle of an airfield seizure, minor concussion, you keep doing what you're doing. But you can write a statement that talks about that. If you had friends or senior leaders that saw get dinged on the drop zone, they can write a buddy letter for you. Those statements carry a lot of weight too. And the VA considers a layman's statement is credible almost to a level of a provider for their own condition, right? If that makes sense. So if I say I hurt my ankle on a jump and this is what happened, and I write a buddy statement, those are taken seriously by the examiners and they're not just blown off as just some letter that the veteran put in there.
As
If you're
you're
gonna,
doing,
yeah, and
yeah.
if you're gonna hire somebody a lot of people will hire a nurse practitioner or somebody to write a nice long narrative of all their conditions. Make sure that they don't just write subjective things like the veteran told me they injured their knee on a jump, right? It needs to be written more in a objective framework to kind of explain what the injury was. There were knee swelling, those kind of things. The individual couldn't continue on because of pain. Things that are more objective are helpful. So now let's go back to the exam. So what happens is you go to do your claim. You could go through a VSO. You could go through a lawyer. You can do it yourself, right? If you're comfortable. But whatever way you do it, you put your packet together, and that packet is called a C file. That C file only includes the information you submit to that file. So you want to have your DD-214 in there. I have guys come in, no DD-214, so I don't know that they were an Army Ranger, right? They could have been I don't know, pencil pusher, right? So it's kind of hard to determine because that's going to factor in on what I think about their claim, because I obviously know that somebody is an infantryman that's carried a rucksack, body armor, and things in the mountains of Afghanistan is a different level of overuse than somebody that worked as a finance NCO for a couple of years, right? In a non-airborne unit. And so that's important to have in there. So you get all those documents put together, and you want to make sure whatever claim you've got, if you've got any documents, service treatment records, that kind of thing, to put them in there. Put your jump log in there if you've got it, because being a paratrooper weighs heavily on the claim process too, as far as back pain and those kinds of things. So make sure that's in there. That whole packet gets put together, which is, like I said, the C file. That's different than your medical treatment records. Most of the young guys, it's all electronic now. And it's different from if you've been seen by the VA, because we get vets that come back that have already been seen by the VA. We don't see your VA file. We don't see your military treatment record because of HIPAA restrictions, right? As the examiner, I shouldn't be able to see all your medical record not pertaining to your claim. So you really got to make sure that what goes into that C file supports your claim. And even if you've got a VSO, you can also have access to that account. And I would recommend it because you can kind of track what's going on in there and what we see, so that, if you can see what we see, then if you've got the right information in there that's going to help us make a decision that supports you. And so that's kind of how that process starts. The next piece is, how does the exam go? And so the exam's kind of broken down into two pieces. There's the physical exam part, the C&P exam itself. They're called DBQs. And whichever condition you have, there's a DBQ for. And then the second part is the medical opinion. And that medical opinion then says, okay, I've done all these different exams. Yep, he's got lumbar strain. He had an ACL tear, maybe had a broken ankle. So I've done all these DBQs. Then the medical opinion will then ask me to make a decision whether I think that injury is service connected or not. If they're still in the military, then I look and say, okay, is there something there in their records that supports it or not, whether it's buddy statements, those kind of things. And then I go, okay, they're still in, so I'm not really worried about chronicity. So then I make a decision, is this directly service connected or not? Pretty simple to do. If they've been out a while, then when I make that medical opinion, I've also got to factor in, okay, yeah, there's one note in the record in 1985 that says they had back pain. For 25 years, there's not another note for back pain, civilian, etc. And now they're claiming back pain from 1995, and it's 2025, and they've worked another career for 30 years, and then it's more difficult to connect the two, right? And so the sooner you can do the exam, the better. So that's kind of the overall part. The other piece is, so there are different medical opinions. So one's direct service connected, right? Okay, I broke my ankle on a jump. I'm claiming that, my ankle was injured while on active duty, and I'm claiming it's direct service connection. Then there's what we call secondary service connections. A good example would be sleep apnea. So sleep apnea, a lot of folks will put under the PACT Act, and sleep apnea is not covered under the PACT Act, and there's no correlation to burn pit exposure and sleep apnea. But there is a connection between post-traumatic stress and sleep apnea. So, as you go through the process, if for some reason something's not approved under one as a direct service connection, is there a potential that it would be secondary service connected, right? Erectile dysfunction would be another one. A lot of folks are not going to get direct service connection for erectile dysfunction unless they were on medication and treated while they were in. But many folks that have post-traumatic stress and other conditions develop it, and then they can claim that as secondary to their post-traumatic stress. And then the third major group is the PACT Act. One of the things I've seen with the PACT Act that's been an issue, education for the veterans, is all like I had a guy come in yesterday. He claimed everything you could think under the PACT Act: irritable bowel, headache, vertigo, a couple other different things. Well, the examiners know that that just doesn't smell right. You see, okay, he's claiming everything he can under the PACT Act, see what'll stick. And even though it's under the PACT Act and it's maybe presumptive, so for instance, rhinitis, runny nose, that's pretty much a given that it's going to be approved. However, if you haven't got any documentation that you actually have rhinitis, then it's up to the examiner if they're willing to make the diagnosis or not. They don't have to. So they could decide not to. The veteran I saw the other day, for about half of them, I thought, okay, yeah, I could see that. And I sided with the veteran on a couple, and then a couple others I didn't. Uh, and I talked to him and said, these couple of conditions, it'd probably be good to go see somebody. They're a little more complicated, and you really need to have a little bit more evidence before, and then resubmit your claim. And so uh, I would say don't get discouraged. The system's complex, like Sergeant Major said. Even for medical guys, it was complex for me. Uh, and then one other thing I would say that helps decrease the complexity, and I again, I'm not supposed to really advise veterans, but I am one, so I do, is I tell them, if you really want to know if your claim is going to get approved, go into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT if I claim this condition under this direct service connection, secondary service connection, PACT Act, and it will spit out a paragraph on what it takes to make that connection. I use it actually in my medical opinions because I may have a guy that said he was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and he was in the Blue Water Navy. Well, I don't know what ships were in the Blue Water Navy. So I'll go on, he'll give me the name of the ship, and I'll go under ChatGPT and it'll come back and say, yeah, that was one of the vessels that was likely exposed to Agent Orange. So it helps their case. So I think, especially the young folks, the technology out there now is so much better. When I went to retire, I was watching videos online, from great people, veterans that put together YouTube videos that you could follow to really help you with your claim. But now you've got access to something that will give you instant information specific to your claim. Very powerful.
Yeah, as usual, you always say some very smart things. Big takeaway, if no one hears anything else out of this, is you've got to own your process. I mean, we obviously work with a lot of guys going through there, and we've had three folks out of the almost 3,000 guys we work with that says, the system ain't working. Yeah. Well, if you don't turn in any of your paperwork, if you don't bother to do that, it ain't gonna happen all by itself.
No,
So yeah, you
yep,
you, you you do have to own it, and
yep. Just like you're a squad leader preparing or a team leader preparing your team or squad for the next mission, you got to do the same for your packet.
yeah, I had a VSO from Wounded Warrior Project say the same thing about bring your spouse in.
Yeah,
Conditions, how powerful that was. So that's another great one. And we obviously work with a lot of older Rangers too, with working with their VA disability, and it's not worth it. And I tell them, well, it depends when you got out, but there's been I forget how long ago, but not that long ago, there was a change of there is a presumption, if you have a condition, as you said, there's a presumption that it's service related. Prior to that law change, which I don't know if it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was the opposite. So that's significant. And the PACT Act has changed a lot of things too. So,
Yes.
folks got to
Yeah, we're seeing a
understand.
lot more Vietnam era guys coming in, a lot more Vietnam and Desert Storm era folks coming in
Yeah.
that hadn't come in before.
Yeah. You touched on most of it, and we're guys in the Ranger Regiment are awful lucky. I mean, they take this Ranger for Life seriously. Colonel O had a medical conference, I think it was last summer, and he invited in Wounded Warrior Project VSOs to say, okay,
Mhm.
this is how the process works. This is what VA is looking for, and also it's like don't pay attention to this barracks lawyer stuff because you're just wasting your time. You're wasting their time. The guy the PAC that guy that came in claiming everything. So the
Yeah.
Ranger Regiment takes that very, very seriously. And as guys change out, we just, the PAs have always been great. We got a new one out at second 275. So he's gonna sit down with the VSO out there also. But is there, you talked about there, but how do they best document injuries and medical history, before leaving the Ranger Regiment? Anything else to add?
I think the providers do a good job. I think the problem is the who's going in to get seen, right? I can't speak of the name, but a former 375 Sergeant Major had some medical issues like everybody had some back issues, and he'd come in and grab some Motrin, but he wouldn't get seen because he had stuff to do. So I had the medics. I said, I don't care if he gets a physical exam, he gets a note. Sergeant Major came in, got some Motrin, assessment, back pain, right? So, take that time. There's no better leaders than the Rangers. I never once saw a Ranger leader discourage their folks from getting fixed because they need them all to be at 100% on the mission. So I think it's really an internal drive on ourselves that prevents us from getting the care we need. It's not the leadership, they support it. The medical personnel will provide it, but you got to take the time and think about things and think about, your long-term health uh, and your longevity in the unit. The more you do to take care of yourself early, the longer you'll be there. You'll be there like Sergeant Major one day,
Yeah.
right? Um, the other thing I'd say about VSOs you brought up are just like troops, right? There's that top 10%, and then there's the middle, and then there's the bottom 10%. And every once in a while,
Absolutely.
I'll notice that there's a VSO that has seen some of our folks that come in that is probably not done as much work for them as they could have. And they are all veterans, but they're not all created equally. So when you show up to meet with one, and I highly recommend using them, if they seem to not be interested or know less about the process than you do, then find another one, right? Because they're out there, they're free, they're available. I don't discourage the use of lawyers, but you're going to pay for that. Not up front, but if you decide you're impatient, you want to go the lawyer route, you're giving up some of your money that really should go to you, and those VSOs are supported and paid for by benevolent groups to do that for you. So I would utilize them first before you do anything else. Um, Sir Major, this is a little twist, but I don't know if you guys have talked about combat service related compensation at all.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
That
a
gets
lot.
brought up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so combat service related compensation can be a game changer for a lot of folks. It can help if you're approved for combat service related compensation, it decreases your, especially if you're a retired military, it decreases your taxable, and I think you have to be retired to do it, decreases your taxable income. So,
You have to be
uh,
retired. Yeah.
yeah. So when I went to retire, and I had more training injuries than combat injuries, but I had both. You submit your packet through Human Resources Command at Fort Knox. So I submitted my packet to Fort Knox with all my injuries that were combat service related, which includes anything that's training for combat, right? Sprained my ankle on a run, have a bad parachute landing, fall on training. All those things count as combat service related compensation. So you take that. I would recommend doing your VA disability first, get that completed. If you become 100%, then you're really in a good ballpark. for combat service related. So then you get your disability back, you submit that to HRC. HRC looks at it and they say, is receiving combat service related compensation going to be a benefit to you or not? Because it depends on different scenarios. And if they do decide that it is, then they give you a percentage. And the way they do it, so I received 100%. So 100% would be equal to my VA disability, which is $4,100 a month. So they take that $4,100 off my retirement check. I get a third check, I think, from the Treasury Department.
You do, yeah.
So I get a check for $4,100 for combat service related compensation, non-taxed. So my taxable income went down $4,000 a month. Then I get my retirement check, which again was decremented $4,000 a month. Then I get my VA disability check, again $4,100 a month that's not taxed. So it's really beneficial to anyone who's served in the regiment, regardless even what your level of disability is. If you retire, that you should do the combat service related compensation. And if it works out for you, you take it. And if it doesn't, then you don't. But I would definitely submit it.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we talked a little about VSOs, and we have been linked up because we had a former ranger who works for the Wounded Warrior Project, and we had him down for one of our symposiums. So we started a relationship with Wounded Warrior Project uh, about 4 or 5 years ago, and we've got a great relationship with them. We have never had anybody that used WWP that needed to use an attorney. I agree.
That's
There
awesome.
are some instances where deep when it gets into, appeals that where an attorney is needed. You're spot on. I mean, every VSO does it pretty much because they want to. They're almost all veterans. They care, but it's a time issue. The guys that are on the military posts, they're mostly what we call BDD VSOs, and that's what they do. They do BDDs, and they're overwhelmed. So they don't
Mhm.
have time to say, "Oh, you're an airborne ranger. Have you thought, I got your medical records here, but what about this? What about that? You Rangers do this, you do this. Well, you're a breacher. What? Tell me about those bro calls. Tell me these things that you normally wouldn't think about. And that's what doing the Warrior Project is really good, is they have the time and they understand the soldiers that they're working with to ask those questions. And they're very good of, even if you don't own it, they're very good at pushing you. And I'm an example. I had to be pushed to do mine. And I'm not that sergeant major you're talking about, but I'm pretty close. Yeah, finding a good VSO and getting your BDD process in on time. Luckily we have counselors at each of the battalions because the Ranger Regiment supports that. So they do talk to the guys, hopefully 180 days out, and start gathering their records at 90 days, and so they can submit in that 180 to 90-day window. But anything else that you'd like to talk about anything else they should think about for BDD benefits delivered at discharge?
I think on that we're good. I would say the current regimental surgeon is, I've spoke to him a couple times, so he's very interested in
Yep.
the process. He's looking at things, and we were doing a lot of this at SOCOM on, low level blast exposure, guys having brain injury where they're not seen because it's not at a level where they may be symptomatic, or at least not significantly symptomatic. And so I think that's probably going to be kind of the next wave that we start to see is brain injuries becoming more recognized. And in SOCOM, I don't know if the regiment, if the folks are doing the cash yet, which is it's basically a survey run through the SOCOM surgeon's office where they basically collect information on low-level blast exposure, any occupational
Pretty
exposures.
sure yeah, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure they are. Yeah.
yeah, pull the A&M in there so you've got a neurocognitive test so that over time, if that changes, that's other evidence. And so folks that are retiring out of SOCOM, they get a copy of their cash and they take that along with their other documentation when they go to do their claims. The examiners are a little surprised because they've not generally seen one before, but it does lay out nicely, the number of times somebody may have breach something, fired a Carl Gustav, that kind of thing. And then you can, explain to the examiner what exactly a Carl Gustav is, uh, and what it can do to your brain, right? And so I think there's a lot of things being done inside both regiment and at SOCOM to kind of get a better grasp around that traumatic brain injury thing, because I think I think we all know that we're probably, some of our suicides and things of that nature are probably undiagnosed brain injuries, and so I recommend, if you could get a cash before you retire, that, or ETS, that I would do that as well. Or
Yeah,
if you're already out, they probably do for somebody that's a vet too.
they do. We regiment and we work with both the Marcus Institute and the Thrive program, and you know all those guys at
Hmm.
Thrive. So yeah, it's a great organization doing great work. Um,
Excellent.
what are the most common mistakes that you see that veterans when they prepare for their claims? You touched on quite a few, but anything else that you want to touch on?
Yeah, excuse me, I got a little cold here. I think one of the issues I see, and it's kind of a combination of the veteran and the VSO, is, and that's why I like Chat GPT, is, there are multiple ways to ask for an opinion. You could ask for a direct service connected, you could ask for a secondary service connection, you can relate it to the PACT Act. But you might have some, like an example would be, so I had somebody claim that their reflux was due to a knee injury while on active duty. Well, a knee injury is not going to cause your esophagus to dilate and cause you to have reflux. Now, if he would have claimed it was due to taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatories for 10 years because of knee pain, that would qualify, likely, right? And so, just going in there, asking ChatGPT, and it will give you information, and it will also, you ask it to add references, and it will give you the references. And it will give you also the references that come directly out of the VA regulations, right? And I forget the exact code it is. That was when they first started allowing veterans to make a claim that did not have documentation within their service treatment records, and that by not having documentation did not mean that they were not injured, and you could not necessarily hold it against them that they didn't have that information. If after doing your history and physical, it was more likely than not that what they had stated was correct, then then you should side with the veteran. And so when you go into the system there, it will really help you lay out to make sure that you match what your condition is to the right medical opinion. That's probably the biggest issue I see. And it's frustrating for us because I'm kind of like, okay, I can see that, yeah, he's got GERD. It's probably due to his non-steroidal, but he didn't claim it that way. And I have to make an opinion based on the claim. Another thing, sometimes guys get the wrong arm, leg. It's been, they hurt their shoulder in, 1965, and they're coming in left shoulder, and they're coming in with a claim of right shoulder condition injured while on active duty. And I'm like, it's the wrong arm. And I, try to ask the reviewers, can I just change the arm on their claim? And no, I can't.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'd be very careful, make sure that you read your own records and remember, because sometimes people don't remember, maybe they've hurt both legs, both arms, and so they may be confusing things. So make sure you got that right claim to the right location on the body under the right medical opinion. Critical to make sure you have the
Yeah,
right
that's a good one to
procedure.
have a good VSO because
Yes.
I got caught on a I forget what it was, but my WWP VSO said, "No, wait a minute. When you and I talked, you said it was this, and now you wrote down this. What is it?" I go, "Oh, thanks for the catch." Yeah,
Yes.
that exact thing happened to me. The next subject is important to a lot of guys, and a lot of consternation about it out there. But how do you balance your mental health claims, PTSD, sleep disorders? You touched on a little bit with concerns.
Hmm.
Maybe not so much about stigma, but career impact. Guys want to get in federal law enforcement. Those kind of things. And
Hmm.
we do tell everybody, hey, make sure you get your life insurance before you get your VA disability done.
Yeah.
Save yourself a lot of money. Yeah, but especially guys are concerned, especially guys want to go to federal law enforcement or some other things, and really healthcare later on. But how do you balance that PTSD and sleep disorders and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because we've got a group of folks that want to keep being hard chargers, but I think what happens is you don't take care of it, and then you find yourself in that new career and not able to continue because now it's caught up to you, right? So I think, it's important to get that. Not, it's great to get it documented, it's great to claim it, but it's more important, and that's one of the other issues I see. A lot of folks are making claims on things that they have significant injuries or post-traumatic stress, but as I talk to them, they're not getting any care for it. They're like, no, I just want it on my disability and, give me my 50%. I'll just suck it up and deal with it. So what I would say is, you know, the VA disability system, I tell the young guys when they come in, it's not a system that you're really disabled. I hate using that term because I
yeah,
don't think we're
exactly.
disabled veterans. I think it's, you know, a system to compensate you for your injuries, but you're able to continue on and function. And I think that gets lost. And so folks come in, we take care of their claims, but we're not ensuring that they're actually getting the care they need through the VA. So once you get those claims and they're approved, then make sure you act on that because now you're going to have access to folks that can help you with that. As far as post-traumatic stress, I'll just really quickly share my story. So had some head injuries and everything. So being down here at SOCOM, I decided before I retired, I'd do the prep program at the James Haley VA, which is an inpatient traumatic brain injury program. We've had many Rangers go through it. And you go through, you meet with sleep doctors, you meet with mental health folks, you meet with, folks to look at musculoskeletal injuries, you do, speech pathology, you name it, you do it. And so when I went in to see the physician for the mental health piece, she asked me some questions. I talked about some things I'd seen and done, and she asked me if I thought I had post-traumatic stress, and I was like, absolutely no. I said, I think I did for a couple of years, flashbacks and that kind of thing, fall asleep in the car. My wife's driving. I wake up because there's been an explosion or something. But over time, that kind of stuff dissipated. Uh, then she says, well, what do you think your kids would say if we asked them?
Mhm.
Do you have anger issues? Are you irritable? Do you sleep okay? And so uh, I said, yeah, they would probably agree with everything you've said. I'm irritable. I get angry. I don't sleep well. And so I wasn't happy, but she diagnosed me with it. So when I did my VA disability, I went in to see the physician, former military guy. I kind of laid out everything. And he said, what do you want to do when you leave the military? You plan on doing any, you know, secret squirrel stuff, etc. And I'm like, no, not really. And he said, okay, because I think he did take that into consideration on my level of post-traumatic stress. So I think the examiners are they understand, like, unless you come in there and you talk, unless you're homicidal, suicidal, or something, that day, then they understand, that people have post-traumatic stress, and most people that have post-traumatic stress are able to fully function in any career field. And so I think that, laying out what you want to do is a smart thing up front with them. Right now, they mainly do it video, so almost never
Yeah.
now do you have to come in. So you're going to be doing it like this, which I think makes it a little more comfortable for folks to speak and to be in a good place when they're done. But I would definitely do it because I can tell you, we see I wouldn't say significant number, but I have folks that come in that have not made it through basic training or AIT that are 70% for post-traumatic stress because the stress of not making it through their training was significant enough where they are being compensated for it. And I can't think of too many folks that have been involved with the global war on terror, with all the things that our guys have seen, the number of years they've been deployed. Uh, it would be unlikely that you don't have something going on. What level is different, right? Um, but I think you definitely I think every ranger that does a claim should claim post-traumatic stress because if nothing else, you will get evaluated and you'll get some documentation on what the mental health provider thinks. I think that's good either way.
Yeah, that's good advice because I mean the real symptoms sometimes they show up initially and they go away, but the most significant cases usually show up, 15, 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah. We have Vietnam guys coming in that are, becoming symptomatic, in their mid 60s, early
Yeah.
70s.
And it's, if you don't have it in your record now, it's a lot harder to get it later when they start showing up.
Yeah.
And the real answer to that is, well, how's it going to affect my career? And again, that's what the Ranger for Life program can help you with is let me talk, I'll let you talk to you want to be an FBI agent, you're worried what they think about it. Well, here's some FBI agents, talk to them and they'll tell you what the real deal is because it's going to be there's certainly no general rule for anything that you're going to do. That's for sure. Whether it's whether it's a CIA or a local police officer, it's always going to be different. Before I ask you the last question, anything else that we didn't touch on that you think's important guys should know about CMP?
I think we've got it. I think we've got really the majority of it. I would say that if anybody ever has questions, Sergeant Major's got my information. I'm always willing to speak to you, whether it's on Signal Chat or whatever way you want to do it. If you want some advice before you make your claim. But I guess my last point is that the examiners, they really are supportive of the veteran. Like when I have a veteran come in and they don't have the information they need for me to give them a positive opinion, it hurts, right? And most of the examiners are not veterans though, and so they may not have a good understanding of what it means to be an airborne ranger. And so you got to you got to paint the picture for them up front of what you've done. And then what I'd say for those retiring is they tend to show up and they don't have a final DD 214 yet because it's in draft. Put the draft in there because the draft will show things like, combat infantryman's badge, master parachutist, and things of that nature, which they all do recognize, and those all hold weight as part of the exam.
Yeah, and I think
Valor awards, Purple Hearts, those kind of things.
yeah, what we've been using is, and what most guys accept, it's a memorandum of record from your commander saying this is this and this, and it's
Yep.
it's it's just accepted just as well. So that's what we counsel guys
Yeah, that's great.
through the process. Well, yeah, this has been certainly very, very helpful. I learned a couple things myself, and been involved with this for a while. But you know, it's the system works. You got to understand the system more than anything else. I mean, the VA is just like the Army. It's black and white. It's regulations, and so understanding how it really works, and if you know if you try to G2 the system, and a lot of times it's going to backfire on you. So be honest about it. Yeah, guys getting out of the regiment are lucky to have providers that understand and care about that you're going to get out and understand how the system works. There's some great VSOs out there that can help you through the process, and you're going to go to that exam and they're going to say, "Hey, here's what they're going to do. They're going to bend your elbow. They're going to put this device on there. If it bends this far, don't lie to them. But when it's uncomfortable." Tell them it's uncomfortable. It's simple as that. You're not lying. It's just tell them yes, because that's what they ask you. Is it uncomfortable? They don't ask if it's pain, if it's tolerable. Can you push through it? Can you still do push-ups? They ask, is there discomfort or whatever the word there is. And the good VSOs will tell you that. Again, not to G2 the system, but just here's what the regulation is. And if you understand what you're doing, you'll be properly compensated. But
Yeah, Mike, good point, because range of motion is important on the musculoskeletal. And the other thing is functional impact. So if somebody comes in and their complaints headaches, and they can lay out to me why, they got to leave work for a couple hours or they got to miss work because they have headaches, that's different than a guy that says, well, I get occasional headache for, an hour or two at work, but I keep driving through. It's different when the guy says, I can't work. I got to go into a cold, dark room and fall asleep to break my headache. So all those kind of things that help. So again, going back to Chat GPT, if you type in a condition, headache DBQ, it will list what the VA is looking for, and you can tell the more boxes you check, probably the more severe your condition is, right?
Yeah.
And so I know for me, I go down the list and I ask all the questions on the headache. Is it on one side, both sides? How long does it last? Is it throbbing? Is it impacted by activity? But I don't know that the examiners have to ask that. They may just say, okay, you get headaches. What other symptoms do you get? So if you don't know things like photophobia, so sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound, because those are common things that happen in headaches, you know, they may not ask. And so I would highly recommend that you look at those DBQs before you do a claim. And then the other area where I see where the examiners don't always ask is they do multiple range of motion. So they do an active one where you move your extremities. Then we move them for you passive. Then we can have you do some repetitions of them. And then they make an assessment. What if you just worked out, what would your range of motion be? And the last one would be if you had a flare up, what would it be? They don't sometimes always ask about flare ups. So if you have a knee that bothers you all the time, but there's times where it really gets bad, like, once or twice a month, make sure you highlight that as well. That, you have a pain all the time, but then you have periods where you really can't function because of that condition. So flare ups are another area to think about.
Yeah, thanks. Last thing I like to ask Ranger veterans is, it's, you know, I don't think most people miss the Army. I not necessarily think you miss the regiment. I think you miss the kind of people that were there. And that's what we miss more than anything else. And people always looking at, they use the word purpose or success, but I call it, after you leave the service, after you leave the regiment. I mean, for you, what is it that keeps you going, that you have more good days than bad days? I mean, it's not just a job, and when you're in the Army, I think success and happiness is probably about 70% of your job in the Army. And when you get out, it's probably closer to 10 or 15%. And you mentioned how blessed and happy you are to what you're doing with the University of Tampa and some other things. So, what is success for you, and how did you adapt? Or you like me, and it's a continual process. But what is success
Yeah,
for you after the regiment and all your time in Ranger and Special Operations?
I do agree with you. It's a process. I think uh, JC Glick has done a couple, posts on his LinkedIn site where he talks about it. I think one of the problems we have is so we're so goal oriented. We always have to have something going on, and we always have to be at like the tip of the spear. And so that transition period, sometimes it takes time to find out exactly what it is you want to do. Some folks might get out and decide, okay, I'm going to go work for one of the three-letter agencies, or maybe I'm going to be a contractor. But a lot of folks, they leave or I'm going to go to college. But others, like me, I left the military. My wife's very ill. I really didn't want to travel. I didn't really want to commit to anyone. There was like this emptiness in me trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do. But I knew that I was retired, so I could afford to take some time uh, to make sure I made the right decision so that I didn't, take a position that I wasn't happy with an organization that didn't have the same values and everything that I have. And so, I jumped in part time, and then I found, okay, this is the right organization. And if something opens, maybe I'll be fortunate enough to be hired full time. And that's kind of what happened for me. Um, it was definitely not in my radar to teach. I thought I'd be doing consulting type work, that kind of thing, maybe still doing some operational stuff. And so I think for me, the students are like the Rangers. They're so motivated. Like there's nothing like a E4 Ranger when you're on the objective, just the way they are, their personalities. You can be in the middle of a firefight and they're joking and smoking. And I think, the students bring out that same kind of energy from me. I feel younger when I'm with them, if that makes sense. And so I think, and then it's just like in the Rangers, you have a chance, whatever your job is, you're training your replacement right. So I kind of feel the same way with the students. We hear a lot of things about uh, um, the younger generation today. They talked about my generation too. The hippie generation was going to do nothing either, right? And so I think, they're going to be better than we were, and they're probably more motivated than I was, and they're definitely more appreciative of the opportunity to go to PA school and graduate, help in rural areas, underserved areas, and it's really motivating. And I definitely do, when I leave here, I feel a little bit lighter on my feet every time I come into the school and leave for the night. It's been really good. So I would just say, don't rush it. Don't get frustrated. Make sure you find what works for you. Make sure you find the right place you want to be with the right support too. That's important. We talked about that on the podcast about PA school is, you know, you can go to PA school anywhere or you can take a job anywhere, but what support system do you have there? Do you have young kids? Maybe grandma and grandpa live close by, or a brother or sister, somebody else who can help support you as you transition. So I think it's real important, and definitely don't lose contact with your ranger buddies, because most units, most, I've served on a lot of units and very few of them are you going to have, a signal chat or a Sergeant Major Hall and his team to help you with your transition. Take advantage of that. You earned it.
Hey, Doc JD, it's always great to talk to you. And I think the first migraine I ever had was when you sold General McChrystal on that $1 million Resusciani dummy to train the medics. And $1 million is a lot of money that I could have spent on bullets in the mid 90s, but it definitely paid for itself 1,000 times over. So I'm going to send this to Rob Miller and make sure he approves it
Oh yeah.
before we publish it. But yeah, it's always
They're
great to
probably having
see
me in a headlock before the night's
you.
over.
But yeah, thanks again for your time, for all you're doing, and Rangers lead the way.
Rangers lead the way, Sergeant Major. Thank